When the alarm starts ringing, pray and kiss your life goodbye. These were the words of wisdom I had received at my laboratory induction 15 years ago. They had been spoken by Professor Williams, and for some reason, when the alarm did begin to ring that day, 15 years on, it was him that I thought of first. As I sat there in my office, with the sirens blaring and orange hazard lights flashing in the corridors outside, I pictured the old professor enjoying his retirement in the Caribbean, a cigar in mouth, jet skiing across the blue ocean. When the alarm starts ringing, pray and kiss your life goodbye. I don't know how long I sat there for, but what brought me back to reality was my colleague being chased past my office by Timothy, our janitor. A small laugh escaped me. It wasn't the comical nature of the scene. No. I laughed because all the sweat, blood and tears I had poured into my research over the years had worked. And I didn't have to look down a microscope either to see the little critters working their magic. It was right there before my eyes. Timothy was our very own lab rat. I suppose the janitor might not have signed up for the job had he known there was a chance he might have been infected by virus X93, the code name given to my research. The main component was the rabies virus. But, like cooking, mix a little bit of this with a little bit of that. You soon end up with something that wants to make Timothy do more than plant a kiss on my colleague's lips. Judging by the man's jerky and unbalanced movements as he ran down the corridor, he was still in the grip of phase 1 of the infection cycle. Phase 2 would begin 15 to 20 minutes after, which would see his coordination become more balanced and Olympic sprinter-esque. It would also crank up the aggression and lust for human flesh. I guess you're probably asking, what is the purpose of creating a zombie-like virus in the first place? Warfare mainly. There are hundreds of military laboratories across the globe where guys like me are tinkering with nature to create deadly biological weapons. We get a memo from a guy in a suit in Washington telling us what he wants, usually inspired by the film he watched the night before. And we get to work. No questions asked. Escapes of these viruses are rare, but they do happen. Yes, COVID, I'm looking at you. The research facilities, however, are designed to reduce the possibilities of an in-house outbreak getting past the reinforced concrete. The first way to reduce the risk is to build the laboratory underground, usually with multiple layers of security at each level. Check. The next is to place the facility in the middle of nowhere, like Alaska, hoping to catch any spillage before it hits the wider world. Check, check. Then the last, but most important of all, is to have a squadron of specially trained soldiers ready to go in at a moment's notice and take out all parties involved if an escape were to take place. Infected, scientists, and any other poor bastard who happened to be down there taking a leisurely stroll on his lunch break. Check, check, check. And it was for these very reasons that I sat in my office and realized, to put things bluntly, I was pretty fucked. My first move that day was to crouch down behind my desk and hide. Over the noise of the alarm, I could hear our infected janitor had caught his prized possession, and my colleague, former colleague I should add, was being eaten alive. Eat up, Timmy. You're a growing boy. Other, less senior scientists in white lab coats streamed past my office, screaming and shouting as they fled towards the elevators. This was a stupid decision, of course, since the elevators would have been permanently locked a second after the alarm came on. The entire military base would have gone into a lockdown, and possibly even Washington had been informed. President, there's some serious shit going down in Alaska. What's that? A zombie virus outbreak in our secret military laboratory. Okay, Jimmy, ready the Air Force One. We're moving to Hawaii. So I bet you're thinking, how did you live to write this then? How did you escape from an underground secret laboratory in the middle of Alaska with the zombies running around? Well, I guess you need to keep listening to find out. I continued to hide in my office, patiently waiting for a soldier in a hazmat suit to kick down the door. I didn't even plan to beg. What was the point? The day you sign up for the gig, they like to gloss over that little part about Private Johnson kicking down your door one day and blowing your brains out. They stuck it right in the fine print. What happened, however, on that day was that no soldier ever came. No one did emerge from the elevators, throwing smoke grenades, gunning down the infected scientists and non-infected alike. No, what happened was that 30 minutes after the alarm came on, it suddenly turned off, giving way to an eerie silence. Behind my desk, I waited, listening. Had the security system malfunctioned? Had the squadron been placed on hold so they could document the effects of virus X93? Had Romeo had an argument with Echo about who got to use the flamethrower, and the bosses ordered him to settle it using rock, paper, scissors? These were the questions in my head as I tiptoed across my office and crouched at the door, opening it slightly. Outside, the white corridor walls were splattered with blood, like a drunken artist had been throwing his paintbrush around haphazardly. A dash here and a dash there, and yes, I can sell this masterpiece for millions. I cracked the door more ajar and stuck my head out. In true typical horror fashion, a light bulb flickered in the glass-paneled ceiling, where underneath lay my dead colleague, their guts open to the world. There was no sign of Timmy the janitor, or anyone else for that matter. It was quiet, deathly quiet, and I suddenly felt claustrophobic being so deep underground. The thought of never feeling the wind on my face caused my body to leave the relative safety of my office and slink out into the corridor. Where was I going? I didn't know, but found myself continuing on until I came to the main laboratory entrance. Here, I crouched and waited. From inside came the soft drone of the analytical equipment. I rose and peeped into the glass windows. Shattered test tubes lay scattered on the floor alongside puddles of blood. But there was no one around. Where the hell was everyone? Or where the hell were they? I should have asked. But I soon found out. Just round the corner of the corridor, 4 of my former colleagues were crouched over a dead body, feasting on the man's torso. It was like watching a pride of lions shearing an antelope, and while I must admit I was sickened, at the same time I felt a jolt of excitement. Virus X92, the early prototype, had always suffered from infighting. Infected mice had always been equally eager to eat one another than other healthier mice. It was me who had theorized that replacing the SPGV glycoprotein with a mutated SPNGK protein would solve this issue. We were just in the pre-trial stages, but here it was in action. The best of friends sharing a meal. I felt vindicated for all those hours persuading my colleagues. Talk about them having to eat their own words. I stayed watching for much longer than I should have, revolted yet enthralled. Finally, I peeled away and crept back down the corridor, past the laboratory and my office, until I came to the elevators. In the vicinity, 4 dead scientists lay disemboweled, their faces frozen in a mix of horror and shock. As expected, the elevators were down. I was attempting to prise the elevator shaft open when something scuttled past the corridor further up. I froze and hugged against the wall. The noise of clanging and growling filtered through the walls as a group of infected roamed the nearby lab, searching for prey. They would be well into phase 2 by now. Heart in mouth, I shuffled past my dead colleagues and was near the staff room when I heard muffled voices inside. I pressed my ear against the door. Yes, people were whispering. As I had my hand on the handle, however, something moved in my peripheral vision, and I turned to find Timothy, our janitor, at the far end of the passageway, grinning. His eyes were alive with a madness that would make your nightmares shiver. "Good boy, Timmy," I stammered, like an owner of an aggressive dog. Timmy's neck spasmed, the rabies virus shining through, and blood dripped down his chin. Frantically, I tried the door handle. It was locked. The voices inside had stopped talking, and I imagined those inside were nervously watching the door. I banged against it. "Fucking open up!" Timmy's grin widened, and he began moving towards me. "Fuck off, Timmy!" I shouted, beating harder against the door. Suddenly, my research didn't seem as great as before. "Open the door, please!" Drawn by the noise, more infected appeared. My feasting colleagues. They were sprinting down the corridor, grinning like Timmy at the delicious feast before them. No doubt the bastards wanted payback for being a great boss. "Open up," I pleaded. "Please." Just when the zombies were upon me, the lock clicked and the door swung open. I pounced inside and 2 people slammed the door shut in Timmy's face, who beat against it, snarling. "Thanks," I gasped, turning around to my rescuers. "You saved my life?" My ex-wife finished. Now, it's probably a good time to point out that my ex-wife is a scientist too. This is where we met, right here, working on virus X93. And, for the most attentive listeners, you will remember that 2 people slammed the door shut on the zombies. Well, that second person was the reason for the ex part in the ex-wife. A man called Jeffrey, who was chief scientist of the research facility and had been screwing my wife behind my back for the past 4 years. Yes, the man never admitted it, and we had broken up due to irrevocable differences. But everyone on the base knew they were together. "Oh, it's you two," I muttered. "Nice to see you're both still alive." Jeffrey, who had been my friend until the divorce, looked genuinely embarrassed. He glanced nervously at my ex-wife, Karen's her name, and said, "Yes, glad you're still alive, Frank, buddy. Seems like that RNA modification you did converting uridine to pseudo-uridine really worked the trick. Good job." As if they agreed with the praise, the zombies banged on the door loudly. "What?" Karen said, scowling. "You're going to congratulate him after we're all going to die?" I smiled. I enjoyed seeing my ex-wife riffled. Jeffrey blushed. "Well, it did work. The evidence is right out there. And his suggested SPGV glycoprotein change has also worked. They don't seem to be fighting amongst themselves." "I don't care," Karen interrupted. "It's his fault we're in this mess." "Trouble in paradise?" I asked, causing them both to blush. Karen glared at me. "Don't you start." "Start what?" "Oh, you know what, acting like you're going to win the Nobel Prize." I shrugged and sat down on the nearest chair. "It depends if there's a Sweden after all this." Karen continued to glare at me. "After all what?" "You know this. If the virus escapes the base, there might not be many Swedish people in Sweden to be giving out awards. Might make it problematic." My ex-wife laughed. "You're pathetic." She looked at Jeffrey for validation, but he looked down sheepishly. Karen's voice became serious. "It won't get out, will it?" Jeffrey shrugged. He walked up to the sink and tried the faucet. It worked. Water seems to be still running. The soldiers were due 15 minutes ago, but have not arrived. Protocol says by now we should have been killed, so the virus might have gotten out already. It's the only way we can explain why we're still alive. Karen frowned. "Impossible." "It's not," I answered. "The only plausible explanation is that it wasn't an accident. I believe someone or some people wanted the virus to escape." I looked at Jeffrey and he nodded as if he had worked this out already. It was sad to think that at one time we used to compete ideas of each other. Alaska's very own Watson and Crick. "The real question is though," I said, "how are we going to make it to ground level to see what's going on up there?" Jeffrey sighed. "There's an override system in my office for non-lockdown emergencies. Hopefully, with the defense systems down, this would qualify, and we might just be able to make it up." Okay, Karen said, and I knew something pessimistic was coming. "If we somehow make it past the zombies and get to your office, then make it up to the elevators and on the ground floor, then make it out of the military base, what then? They'll want to kill us. You both know this." Neither Jeffrey or I replied. She was talking about our government. "Yes," I answered miserably. "We will be hunted. Forever. Until we are dead." Jeffrey nodded. "Yes, that is safe to assume. If we ever make it out, we will live the rest of our lives as fugitives." We all took a moment to process this information. I thought of Professor Williams again, and suddenly his retirement in the Caribbean didn't look so great. Somehow, I didn't think he would be safe there. The Secret Service would come for him. 2 men in black suits would appear one day, maybe just before lunch, or perhaps when he was getting ready to go snorkeling. Whichever, or whenever, they would come. There was no way the government would let this news ever get out. It was ironic, because we had dedicated so much of our lives to a virus that, if it didn't kill us, would see us murdered like fugitives. There would be no golden handshake from Uncle Sam. Okay, I said, breathing heavily. How are we going to get out of this room and to Jeffrey's office and get those elevators back on? It was Karen who pointed to the ceiling. Air vents. They always go through the air vents in the movies, right? I nodded. Yes, I guess they do. As we crawled along the air vent, I felt like Bruce Willis in Die Hard, albeit a skinnier and less alpha John McClane. Come out to Alaska. We'll make a virus, have a few laughs. Behind me came Karen's grunt of disgust as she struggled in the tight space. Who would have known when we had signed the divorce papers last year, we would one day find ourselves crawling above our workspace while the virus we had been working on was currently swimming in the veins of our infected colleagues who lurked below. Not me anyway. Jeffrey's office, which we were making for, was found on the opposite side of the laboratory. In a twisted sort of way, our little journey allowed us an aerial view of the damage wrought by virus X93, like that of a news reporter flying over a bombed city. I counted 15 dead and a further 12 infected. This gave a total of 30 people, including myself, Karen and Jeffrey, but did not account for everyone. Including the janitor, there should have been 31 of us. I did the scheduling. Sadly, as we crawled through the vents, we witnessed this missing person, Dr. Eckhart's end. We were halfway over the main laboratory when a person crawled out from underneath a bench. Why he left the relative safety of his hiding place, we'll never know. But one can only assume that his nerve broke and he wanted to make a run for it, hoping that a safer place existed. It did not, and his clumsy movements attracted the attention of the nearby infected, who mercilessly ran him down as he tried to flee. Above, we watched horrified. It wasn't so much the screams of pain, but the infected's enjoyment of the suffering. One even began to laugh like a hyena, a cold, calculated chuckle that made me believe they were more intelligent than I first thought. They had an awareness of each other, as if they were a primitive primate society. It made me almost grateful that we hadn't been able to overcome the hydrophobia symptom, which would ultimately see them perish. At best, they had a lifespan of 3 days. During my years working on virus X93, whenever I watched or read anything remotely to do with zombies, this was almost my first point of argument. All living things, down to the smallest organisms, needed water. Failing to replenish H2O would ultimately restrict muscular movement. And the many hours I had watched infected mice refuse to take a drink almost felt like a blessing now. In summary, therefore, there is no evidence to believe that even in the event of an outbreak of virus X93, human extinction would be remotely possible. Perhaps lower than 0.01%. Yes, you drop a couple of infected in Times Square and all hell's gonna break loose. But humans would quickly outlast and eradicate the threat, even if we are a stupid bunch. Nothing to worry about then? No, I guess not. Other than I have to escape the underground laboratory. I came to the opening in the vent above Jeffrey's office and opened the grate. For all my clever observations, it wasn't really going to help me if the infected smashed through the glass panels into Jeffrey's office. I swung down from the duct and was thankful the blinds were closed. Karen followed afterwards, and the last to descend was a red-faced Jeffrey. "They have lots of energy," he whispered to me. "Think the mutation we performed. That's enough," Karen hissed. "Can you two stop it?" I did not answer, but was actually glad Karen had interrupted. Being inside Jeffrey's office with the blinds closed made my imagination run wild. I had images of them kissing, while I, oblivious to the world, walked past. Being the sucker I was, I bet I had walked past, daydreaming about alterations to the virus, while Jeffrey was behind the glass with my wife. "Yes," I whispered. "Let's get the power to the elevators back on and get the hell out of here." Jeffrey nodded and crouched over towards his desk, opening the sleek laptop. When he lifted the screen, it made a loud ping, a noise which seemed to reverberate around not only the laboratory, but the whole of Alaska. Ping. We're down here. Come get us. We held our breath, waiting for it, the infected zoning in on us. But they never came, and Jeffrey wiped the sweat from his brow and started typing in the password to the laptop. Karen and I waited near the air vent. You better believe that we would have been up that grate faster than you can say Jeffrey had the infected smashed into the office. As we waited, Karen and I made eye contact for a second. I had expected a cold look, but instead she gave me a smile tainted with sadness that read, "What happened to us, Frank?" I looked away. I don't know what happened. You couldn't have got a tighter couple when we first started dating. We were that couple who you knew truly loved each other, the ones others would look for small signs to comfort themselves that the relationship had cracks. Yet, although they looked, no one ever found anything. That was us. What happened to us, Frank? This happened. Virus X-93. We gave our lives to manipulate nature, and it came back to haunt us. Trapped away in an underground laboratory in Alaska, I thought I was at the forefront of science. In reality, the best I could have hoped for was a payoff that would buy a holiday home in Florida. That is what happened to us. Our infected colleagues outside are what happened to us. Done, Jeffrey said, snapping me out of my gloomy thoughts. God knows what's gone on up there, but there's been no message. It could be worse than down here. I gulped. Well, I guess we just have to find out. We should use the vent to get right over the elevators. Get as close as we can before they can get to us. Feeling more like a team now the elevators were back on, I gave Karen a boost back into the air vent. I felt more nervous now, possibly because there might have been a chance of an escape. I followed Karen up and was surprised to see a cockroach scuttle beside my head up there. Strange, for the laboratory was considered a sterile environment. Below, the infected were agitated, growing frustrated that they could find no other live victims. Once over the grate near the elevator, Karen turned her head back and whispered, "Okay, here goes nothing." An infected stumbled down the corridor, chuckling to himself. We waited until his footsteps faded. Then, a deathly white Karen craned her neck back once more. "I'm going down." "Good luck," I mouthed. Unhinging the grate, she disappeared, and I shuffled along the air vent. Adrenaline pumping around my body. It was do or die time, and I dropped down into an empty corridor. Karen was already standing at the elevator switch, tapping the button like she was late for an important meeting. The very action set off a chain of events. The first being the low grumbling noise of the elevator moving, which seemed to spread out to every crevice on level 5. It was right out of a horror movie. For even though I couldn't see them, I could picture the infected suddenly snapping their heads to one side, growling at the mechanical wearing. "Come on," I hissed to Jeffrey, who was still in the vent. Being a larger man, he was having a much harder time of squeezing down the gap. With the art of deception well and truly finished, the first infected appeared at the end of the corridor, crashing against the wall like a drunk, gnashing, snarling, then sometimes screaming in pain. The once young scientist began sprinting towards us. With a cling, the elevator doors opened. I had half forgotten that the rest of the military base might have been compromised. So, I was nearly frozen by the side of a dead soldier slumped at the back of the elevator. It was only Karen screaming and dragging me inside the elevator that I made it. Otherwise, I would have just stood there like a dummy, observing the dead soldier. Karen smashed her hand against the buttons, pressing levels 4, 3, 2 all at once, an accident we would have to worry about later. Meanwhile, we were busy urging Jeffrey on, who was still only halfway down the air vent when the doors began to shut. I think he must have heard the closing doors because he let out a terrified squeal and shouted, "Wait!" Finally, he dropped down, but the moment he touched the floor, he knew it was too late. We all knew it was too late, and we were not going to wait for him. Now, before anyone listening to this begins to accuse Karen or myself, You should know that in a situation like this, the body reverts to basic survival instinct. Yes, in the movies, they dash out of the elevator and save their friend, lover. But in reality, life is not like that. Stepping outside that elevator would have been the equivalent of stepping in front of a train. Unless you wish to end your life, your brain, body, will not let you do so. It's not that you don't want to, it's that you can't. And that is why Karen stood there with her hand over her mouth, unable to move. She would never see Jeffrey's last look because she let out a moan and averted her eyes. But I would. I would see his face slump. Not because he was about to be eaten alive, but out of sheer heartbreak that his lover of the last few years would leave him to die. I saw a man who truly understood the meaning of the word alone. A man who fully understood that the true monsters in the laboratory were not the infected, but us, humans. They were our creations, and ultimately the act of playing God had transformed us into the devil. We heard, yet did not see the young scientist collide with Jeffrey. The only way I can describe it is like that of a distracted quarterback who suddenly sees his sweetheart in a crowd and waits a fraction too long to throw the ball. All we heard was the sickening crunch of a body against a body and the tearing of flesh as the infected bit into his throat. I don't think Jeffrey even screamed. The elevator lurched upwards, leaving our fallen companion behind. Beside me, Karen silently wept. I'm sorry for your loss," I muttered, unsure what else to say. "Oh, Frank," she cried and collapsed into my arms, sobbing. "He's dead. Gone. I'll never see him again." I placed my arm around her for the first time in a year and a half. Never in my wildest dream did I imagine we would ever be this close again, remembering the end of our relationship when even the slightest touch would have made her shudder. She hugged me tightly, while below, her lover was being eaten alive, a man who I considered responsible for our breakup. But that wasn't true, was it? I had destroyed our marriage, not Jeffrey. It had been me who had ignored my duties as a husband, me who had been too committed to his research to see that our marriage had been falling apart right before my eyes. No, Jeffrey wasn't to blame. I was. "He's dead, Frank," she moaned. "I can't believe it." The elevator doors began to drift open. In our misery, we had forgotten that Karen had pressed all the level buttons in our haste to depart. Still embraced, we turned slowly, dreading what we would find. If we had thought that the turmoil of the last hour would prepare us for what we were about to see, then we were wrong. Go directly to jail. Do not pass. Go kind of wrong. The opening of those doors is an experience that tested my sanity. It made me question whether everything I had been taught was a lie. Science was a lie. I have never believed in the supernatural or what others may call ghosts and spirits. But whatever was out there on level 4 made downstairs with Timothy and Jeffrey and good old Dr. Eckhart, who became the impromptu meal of the day, look like heaven. You couldn't see it, but you damn sure could feel it. A presence drift through the doors, like a bad smell. Karen could sense it too because she started shivering uncontrollably, recoiling at this unknown entity. It didn't press against our skin or anything physical. It seemed to press against your soul. My colleagues and I had always joked about how level 4 employed acne-ridden lab techs, small fish compared to us whales who worked the floor below. We had always assumed that the research laboratories were ranked according to security risk, and ours being the deepest underground was the most important and dangerous. Well, you better believe that as I looked out over level 4, I doubted my theory, for standing behind the glass of the nearby laboratory were 6 dead scientists, each with their backs turned towards us. I bet you're asking, how do you know they're dead if they had their backs turned to you and are standing? It would be a good question. And I would answer, I knew this because Their heads slowly began to rotate in a 180-degree motion without their bodies moving an inch, which no living creature could do. It was a move right out of The Exorcist playbook, only this time there were 6 scientists in place of poor little Reagan. Their heads twisted to reveal empty eye sockets, the blood crusted and dried where the eyeballs had been removed. It was the eeriest moment of my life. Facing off against these demons are the best way I can describe them. Whatever possessed the scientists was aware of our presence. To the naked eye, the laboratory looked no different than on any other day, but the soul inside you could feel the thick smog of levitating evil. In a synchronized motion, the scientists grinned as if a puppet master had pulled their strings. My jaw fell open, and to this day, hearing the cling of the elevator doors closing was akin to being pulled out of a frozen lake just before you were about to drown. Once the doors had closed, I collapsed to my knees. "Frank?" Karen whispered, no longer sobbing. "What's going on? What the hell was out there?" I turned to find her bulging eyes white with fear. I guessed I probably looked worse. "I don't know," I croaked. My throat was raw, like it had been rubbed with sandpaper. If I was a religious man, I'd say we are in hell. The next part can only be put down to the special recovery powers of women, a fascinating study to get lost in, for it was Karen who took control of the situation. "Come on," she said, helping me to my feet and dusting me down. "We will not give up that easily." She lifted my chin. "Hey, we can get through this, right?" Trembling, I looked up into her fierce eyes. I nodded. "Yes, maybe we." It was at that moment when the doors on level 3 opened. Out of fear of seeing more demons, we both held our breath, then relaxed as we looked out over an empty laboratory. No sooner had our fear deflated, however, than a burst of mechanical laughter sounded, and out of nowhere appeared a scientist, so caught in laughter that he collapsed onto the nearest bench. There was nothing funny about the situation, and the fear in the man's eyes told me he didn't think so either. Horrified, I asked, "What the hell is wrong with him?" Karen did not answer, but began to stab the close button repeatedly. The laughing scientist stretched out his hand as if for us to wait, then managed to rise from the desk and stagger towards us. "Wait!" he cried, between bursts of hysterics. "They're evil! Wait!" He was cut off by the elevator doors. I placed my hands over my head and fell against the wall. Fuck, I think I've gone crazy. Is this the elevator to hell? "Frank," Karen hissed, shaking me. "You got to keep yourself together. We can't." The power went out in the elevator, plunging us into darkness and causing it to judder to a stop. I laughed. I had cracked. "Huh," I said. "That's it. Game's over. No credit left. Defeated before we had to face the big boss upstairs." "Frank?" Karen snapped. "What?" "Shut up, will you?" I slumped to the floor, nearly jumping out of my skin when I felt the cold, limp body of the dead soldier beside me in the darkness. I had forgotten all about him. Karen kicked me. "Where are you?" Where do you think? I'm in the elevator, next to my good old friend, Private Fred. Though he's not feeling too well. Are you, buddy?" "Shut it, Frank. God, you always were a baby. Where's your phone?" I slipped my phone out of my pocket and handed it to her. A moment later, a burst of light blinded me. "Get up," she snapped, holding the flashlight in my face. Miserably, I accepted it like an angry toddler, then watched with curiosity as she ran her fingers over the doors. "What are you doing?" "I'm getting us out of here. What does it look like? Make yourself useful and get that soldier's gun." I rolled my eyes and stooped down over the dead private. He had a large gash on the side of his forehead and a deep wound on his neck. In his hand was a Glock. I waved my hand over his face, then knocked on his skull. "Hello? Anybody home?" No, I guess not. I lifted his eyelid, this time actually jumping back at the red veins forming in the sclera. The pupil had stared back at me like the man was very much alive. I stood back up and coughed. "We should get going, Karen." "Yes, I know," she replied, irritated. "What do you think I'm trying to do?" I pointed at the soldier. "I think our friend here might come back from the dead." Karen swiveled around. "What?" "Yeah, it's not virus X93. That much I do know, but God knows what else they've been doing around here." The dead soldier's hand twitched. Karen screamed and pushed me. "Get the gun, you idiot!" Without thinking, I lunged for the soldier's hand, prizing the stiff fingers away from the Glock. In my peripheral vision, I saw one of his eyes open. "Frank, hurry up! He's waking up!" A bit of sweat trickled down my forehead as I prized away the last finger. The dead, very much alive soldier groaned. I raised the Glock as the dead man lurched towards me, pressing the trigger and hoping the gun was loaded. It was, and a loud bang ricocheted around the elevator. 10 seconds later, I opened my eyes to see pieces of brains splattered on the metallic walls. Karen was pressed in the corner, staring at the limp body. "I think he's dead," I said. "Hopefully anyway. Are you okay?" Karen's eyes flicked towards me. She nodded. "Yes, or maybe not. I don't know." Offering a hand, she helped me to my feet for a second time. Once we stood face to face, I felt a jolt of fear mixed with excitement. Karen stared back. Should I kiss her? Is this the part in the movie where we embrace and confess our love? If so, that must have been a record speed of getting over someone. The infected were probably still chewing on Jeffrey's privates as we speak. Karen cleared her throat and embarrassingly turned away, examining once more the doors with the flashlight. "I think we can get this open. Give me a hand, will you?" I felt a pang of disappointment that we hadn't kissed and helped her by jamming my fingers into the metal. 1, 2, 3, heave! With a screech, the entrance gave way to reveal concrete. "Ah, damn," I began. But Karen shone the torch beam towards the ceiling, and above our heads was an opening. The entrance to level 2. It was just room enough for us to crawl through. "Oh, good," I said. "I guess our journey continues. Let's go explore in the darkness, shall we? I can't wait to find out what else is out there." I hoisted myself up through the narrow gap in the elevator and carefully crawled out onto level 2. In the shrouded darkness, I took a deep breath, attempting to steady my pounding heart. "Here," Karen whispered from below, passing up the phone we were using as a flashlight. The light filtered out to reveal a wide corridor which ended at a set of doors. Behind those doors was the main laboratory, a place I had never been to before, but was rumored to harbor smallpox and anthrax, among other deadly viruses. "What do you see?" Karen asked. "Not much," I replied, then glanced nervously at the dead body beside her. "Come on, let's get you out before that soldier has a second resurrection." Karen accepted my hand, and I helped her crawl out of the elevator shaft, careful to make as little noise as possible. Once we were both out, we crouched and stared nervously down the passage. There appeared to be no immediate danger, but the atmosphere was tense, as if in anticipation of impending doom. "What's the plan then?" I asked, because I sure did not have one. "I believe there should be emergency stairs on this level that lead to the ground floor," Karen said. "I inquired about them when I first started here, when I was worried about the elevator failing and being trapped underground. I was told the emergency stairs were only built to level 2 and no lower. Finding them is our best shot, even if it's not guaranteed." I nodded, and as we were about to make our way towards the entrance, a terrifying scream came from inside the laboratory. "Turn off the light," Karen hissed. As more screams joined in, like they were competing against one another, then came the sound of scurrying feet and the smashing of glass. "Infected," I muttered bitterly. "After the horrors on the other levels though, I can't decide if I'm relieved or terrified that virus X93 is back. What's our move now? We have to find those stairs still. What? With the infected in here? Yes, Karen hissed. Unless you have any other ideas. No, I didn't. So remained quiet until the screams faded and gave way to an eerie silence. Karen tucked in my shirt. Let's go. We're going to have to risk it. In the stuffy blackness, we crept forward. No matter how silently we moved, our footsteps seemed to bound around the passageway like they wanted to attract attention. Here they are, over here. Come get them, come eat them. Near the entrance, I flicked the flashlight on and cupped my hand over the phone to dim the light. The doors stood right before us. Various hazard labels were printed on the front, and a message that read, "Authorized personnel only." I pushed the door lightly and breathed a sigh of relief as it gave way. I looked at Karen, whose nervous face broke into a weak smile. She squeezed my hand. "Whatever happens in here, Frank," she said. "I want you to know that I'm sorry for what happened between us." And a loud clanging sounded inside the laboratory. I blinked. And nothing. I'll go first with the torch and lead the way. If we come across any infected, you shoot them to high hell, okay? Sure. Using a fraction of the light to guide the way, we pushed the doors aside and entered. The silence in the room was deafening. I wanted to scream and shatter the weight of it, let it come crashing down and quicken the inevitable that the infected would find us. I felt like they knew we were there, and acting in a group were slowly creeping towards us, grinning while they circled and cut off any escape. As we crawled on our hands and knees between the lab stations, we had to be careful to avoid the broken glass that covered the floor. There were also the mutilated bodies of dead scientists. I couldn't see much because of the dim light, but you sure as hell shivered when your hand pressed against the body part lying on the floor. An outstretched arm, a torn leg, pools of blood still warm and beginning to dry on the vinyl flooring. Karen led the way deeper into the laboratory. Rows of benches, fume hoods, and various analytical instruments that 2 hours earlier might have been stationed and fully functioning were now silent, as if a museum of the past. Every creak and breath seemed amplified, every footstep a loud foghorn. Occasionally from out the blackness came the whimpering of the infected. And in these moments, we stopped, listening to the pit-patter of feet scurry by, listening to them pass mere inches away. When it seemed we were about to make it across without attracting attention, we came out into a long passageway and were greeted by a pair of pale, luminous eyes. Instinctively, I raised the gun, ready to shoot, until Karen directed the flashlight in that direction to reveal a scientist slumped against the wall, injured but very much alive. His face bore a vacant, haunted look. "Help," he mumbled, the words turning into a gurgle as blood spilled from his mouth. I tightened the grip on my Glock, but Karen moved towards him and knelt at his side. Wincing from the pain, the scientist gathered enough strength to speak. "So, others are alive. I'm guessing you're from another level, since I don't recognize your faces?" Karen nodded. "Level 5. What happened here?" "Everything went to hell. That's what. One moment I was working, the next, Dr. Lima started attacking everyone. We isolated him in a room, but not before he had bitten others, who turned." He panted, and his hand moved to a bite mark on his neck. Karen and I exchanged wary glances. "We're trying to get to the emergency stairs," Karen explained. "Do you know where they are?" The scientist nodded, his eyes darting nervously toward the darkness behind us. "Yes, I do. Down the hallway on the right. Those creatures, they're everywhere. You need to help me." "We're going to ground level," I said in a voice fractionally above a whisper. "We'll be back with help." "No," the scientist hissed, gripping my arm with whatever strength he had left. "You can't leave me here. Is that what you were working on? Did you create those monstrosities?" I pulled away from him and his accusations, and in the laboratory, the whimper of an infected sounded. "Shh, you're going to attract them. We will be back. Just stay alive. We will bring help. I knew it was bullshit, but I had to tell him something. Wait, the man said, his eyes beginning to bulge in terror. Help me, please. As his voice became more urgent, the desperation strengthened his vocal cords. Don't leave me. Karen gave my shirt a tug, and I understood what she meant. We could not help him. And together, with the flashlight turned off, we began to inch backwards into the blackness. The scientist's voice called after us. No, don't! Why? The man's anguished cries rang out, attracting the attention of the infected. I grabbed Karen's hand and pulled her against the wall, hoping to evade the marauding infected who were bounding from both directions now. To our terror, as we stood there, I could feel the stuffy air moving as they made with a frenzied urgency towards the scientists' please. I could smell the perfume that still lingered on the female infected, a scent tainted by the metallic smell of blood. 3, 4, 5 bodies scuttled past. And just when I thought we were going to get away with it, disaster struck, for an infected collided blindly with me. That was the moment I knew the game of hide-and-seek was over. I tumbled to the ground, and Karen let out a terrified scream. The creature, seemingly as surprised as I was, let out an irritated growl and began to thrash in my direction. Instinct took over, and I raised my gun. A burst of gunfire illuminated the corridor like a strobe light, and for a brief moment, I saw the horrifying scene. 6 or 7 infected were tearing into the scientist. The light vanished as quickly as it had come, but not before the bullet found its mark, whistling through the infected's skull and causing it to slump to the ground. Frank? Karen shouted, grabbing my hand and pulling me to my feet. That is when everything descended into chaos. The infected, now aware of our presence, abandoned their attack on the scientist and charged towards us. Fleeing down the passageway, we ran for our lives. Fortunately, Karen kept her wits about her and guided us towards the emergency stairs, conveniently tucked into an alcove at the end of the corridor. We reached the alcove and slammed the door shut behind us, leaning against it as the infected pounded on the other side. Just hold, I shouted. They have poor memories, so should move away soon. Yes, I know that, Frank, Karen said through gritted teeth as she struggled to hold the door. Have you forgotten that I worked on the virus for nearly as long as you? Panting and trembling, we held the door with all our might, our bodies straining against the relentless force of the infected on the other side. Slowly, however, the scratching and beating on the door became less, until finally, the last infected person behind the door slunk away, leaving us alone in the dark staircase. I gave a sigh of relief and slunk to the floor. Well, that's level 2 completed, but that was close, way too close. Yes, Karen said. Now all we have to do is climb the stairs to the ground floor and see what awaits. I looked up at the spiraling staircase and aptly named it the Stairway to Heaven. The spiral staircase leading up to ground level was 100 meters of winding concrete. The rugged steps were unevenly and oddly spaced, making me wonder whether the engineers who designed the military base were either hungover or feeling lazy on the day they came to the emergency staircase. Either that, or they considered whoever was to use them fucked. The concrete steps were also incredibly steep, so that by the time we had climbed the first dozen, Karen and I were exhausted. Add to the equation, we were thirsty and hungry, and you didn't get 2 happy campers. You know what I miss? I called out as we ascended, my tired body leaning on the banister for support. What's that? Remember every evening after work, you used to make that lemon drink? 5 ice cubes, 2 lemon slices, sparkling water, sometimes even a touch of mint. I got so accustomed to that drink, I could tell if there were 4 ice cubes rather than 5, 3 lemon slices instead of 2. Well, you know, I could really do with one of those right now. I wiped the sweat from my brow and nearly walked right into Karen, who had stopped dead in her tracks. Hey, I said, are you okay? In the darkness of the stairwell, her silhouette took a deep sigh. Yes, fine, she replied and cleared her throat. Just I haven't made that drink in a while. She took another deep sigh before continuing. Onward we went, until the stairway gave way to a small concrete platform, where a single fire door stood. "Here's level 1, I said, half shivering at what lurked on the other side of that door. Karen went and pressed her ear against it. "Wanna go take a look?" I took a step backward. "Are you mad?" She turned and raised an eyebrow. "It's a joke, Frank. One thing I used to remember about you is that you had a better sense of humor." "Oh, well, I guess I probably did. I think I lost it when you started screwing our boss." The rest of the climb up was accompanied by a growing dread that the final exit might be locked. And after all our considerable efforts and sheer luck of making it this far, we would find ourselves trapped, doomed to reside underground for all eternity. When we did reach the top, a light seeped underneath the door, teasing us at the world which lay beyond. I took a deep breath. "Do you want me to do the honors? Or do you? I sure hope we're not going to burst into a surprise party. Imagine if this was all a setup and we were being filmed for a reality TV show, Virus X on Fox." Karen smiled. "What?" "You," she whispered, still smiling. "You think you're James Bond with that gun." I tipped my head in acknowledgement and cocked the gun. "I'm more Jason Bourne." She laughed. "How about we do it together?" A little embarrassed, I nodded and put my hand over hers. Then we pressed down on the handle. And with a click, the door gave way, revealing the research facility's entrance lobby. We were greeted by a rush of cold air, and for a few seconds were blinded by the daylight spilling in through the doors. Or wait, they weren't open doors, but smashed curtain walls. Shattered glass covered the lobby floor, and that rush of icy air was the stiff Alaskan breeze flowing over the military base, cold enough in March to freeze Mr. Jimmy down below if you didn't have your thermal pants on. But we really didn't get a chance to think about the cold, because after getting accustomed to the brightness, we saw the true extent of the devastation in the lobby. Strewn across the marble floor were dead soldiers and other military base staff in civilian clothes. Most had visible chunks of flesh missing. No prizes for guessing why, and lay about the place where they had made their last stand. It hadn't gone well for them. That was clear. But the bullet holes peppering the walls in the US flag that hung from a pepperette gave an indication they had struggled to the last. Karen gasped and began to shake her head. "It doesn't make sense, Frank. None of this makes sense." "No, it doesn't," I said miserably, and looked glumly out of the shattered glass and over the military base. Underneath the bright sunshine, the other buildings stood solemnly. Piles of cleared snow stacked high beside their sidewalks. Beyond a small row of barracks, I could see the outer Bremer walls that ringed the base. There were 12-foot-tall, reinforced concrete walls, which I had always joked were to keep us in rather than keep others out. I didn't find it so funny now that we had to contemplate getting over them somehow. "Come on," I said. "We can't hang about and find out what happened. We need to salvage warm clothes from..." I hesitated, glancing around at the mutilated bodies in the lobby. "We need to steal from these people and get the hell out of here." Karen grimaced, but didn't argue. She understood the logic. God only knew where the infected were, and there was a big fat plural in there because these people weren't killed by a Timmy the janitor. No, this was the work of a horde. Somewhere out there in the snow was a whole load of Timmys running around. I walked up to the nearest soldier and stooped over him. His eyes were closed, but his arms were jerked in the air, twisted in some sort of way which seemed unnatural. I ignored it, hoping it was the fast onset of rigor mortis, and began unbuttoning his military-issued thermal coat. Karen was doing the same nearby to another corpse. With my breath fogging, I started to feel that Alaskan cold bite. It was the one thing you never got used to. You could spend all day underground, and every evening you would be surprised about the cold that lay in wait like a faithful dog at the surface. The sky could be as clear as the desert, the day as sunny as Bermuda, but when your skin felt the pinch of sub-zero temperatures, your teeth naturally began to chatter away. For all the years I've spent in Alaska, it was the one thing I couldn't wait to be away from. And I might have been closer to that wish than I thought. For the dead soldier whose coat I was unbuttoning opened his eyes. At that moment, however, Karen screamed, "Frank, look behind you!" As I stared into the dark pupils of the dead soldier, I wanted to reply that I was a little preoccupied, honey. The baby's awake. "Frank!" This second scream instinctively took me back to last year during the breakdown of our marriage. I had a flashback of being awoken at 1 a.m. by Karen, who had been heavily drinking. "Frank, where's the remote, you moron?" It was for that very reason, therefore, that the scream won, and unable to focus on the dead alive soldier, I glanced behind to find a horde of infected approaching across the snow. They were pouring out of the nearby buildings, like hundreds of bees being sent out to protect the colony. Possibly the whole goddamn base was heading our way. "Oh shit," I mouthed, just as a hand grabbed my ankle. If this had been a cartoon, then my bones would have jumped out of my body and left only my skin. So much was the shock of feeling the ice-cold grip of the dead soldier. I turned back to see him grinning at me. Now, the old Frank would have squealed and half died of fright. The old Frank might well have even wet himself. Well, the new Frank did all of those things, but the new Frank also had a Glock in his hand, which I aimed at the soldier's forehead. The grin seemed to fade on the infected's head, as if the lingering intelligence realized he was in trouble. I smiled. "Oh, not so big now, are you, tough guy?" The bullet exploded from the gun and rocked the man's head back against the marble floor. I brought up the gun and blew the smoke away. Or at least, I wanted to. But Karen flat past me and yanked my arm as she went, dragging me towards the door, not back on the ground, but towards the offices where the paper pushers, as we like to call them, worked. It was a huge office block attached to the research facility, in part to cover up for the true nature of the work being done on the ground. It was where we had our big meetings. Sometimes in those boardrooms, we would get important suits from Washington to join us, usually the serious type wanting to climb the ladder. And to do so, they had to get up the first few dirty rungs, which included biological warfare. They were always pleased about our progress, not yours. I wondered what they thought about our work now. I imagined the suit in Washington mumbling to the president about virus X93, trying to explain the concept about the zombie virus. We crashed through the door and into the offices. In stark contrast to the lobby, the space was relatively unscathed. A few papers lay scattered, and the occasional office chair lay toppled over. But other than that, the place was fairly tranquil. Hell, I'd seen more chaos during the Christmas party. But I didn't really have time to think about it because the infected were hot on our tail. They tore through the offices, spilling into the rooms after us. We soon found ourselves cornered down a long corridor with all the doors locked. There was no escape. As we backed up against a set of locked doors at the end of the corridor, waiting for them, I felt Karen's fingers slowly interlace with mine, and I turned to find her eyes filled with tears. She whispered, her voice barely audible over the growing noise of the approaching infected. "Frank, what I meant to say earlier on level 2, She was interrupted by the locked door behind us opening, and the face of an old, grizzled man appeared. He was dressed in high-ranking military attire, medals fastened to his overcoat. He squinted at us like we had woken him from a deep slumber. "Are you kids gonna come inside or keep yapping out there?" We both gaped in disbelief. The grizzled man, however, took the initiative and invited us in with a yank of our arms. He then slammed the door shut on the oncoming infected, as cool as a cucumber. The infected smashed against the doors, but the military man merely shrugged. "It's bomb-proof. She'll hold." I looked about and found we were inside a long boardroom, dominated by a large oak table and plush leather chairs. Panoramic windows offered a view of the base and the outer perimeter walls, which glistened underneath the sun. The military man, whose array of medals clinked as he walked, moved over to the end of the board table and settled into a chair, On the table sat a whiskey bottle and an ashtray with a smoldering cigar. He took the cigar and had a drag, and through the drifting smoke said, "You want a drink?" Neither Karen nor I moved. The man chuckled. "What are you both, sober or something?" With the infected still banging on the doors, I plucked some courage and said, "Look, what's going on here? Where's General Martins? He was the military commander of the base." The man took another long drag from his cigar and leaned back in his chair. "Martins is dead. Everyone's dead." He turned his gaze out of the window, and the sun cast his long shadow across the room. "I'm General Hunt, and I'm the man responsible for this mess. Now, are you two gonna sit down or what?" I pulled out an office chair and motioned for Karen to sit. She shook her head and folded her arms. I nodded and remained standing. General Hunt shrugged and began to pour himself a large glass of whiskey. "Which level are you?" he asked. 2 or 1? 5. Karen answered. "We worked on virus X93. The general said, rocked back, and emitted a crazed, drunken laugh. He seemed to be trying to compete with the infected outside the room. "Honey, every level worked on virus X93. 4, 3, 2, 1, the whole lot of you." Our surprised faces made him grin. "Oh, let me guess. You thought you were the clever ones. Well, newsflash, honey. We had all you miserable bastards working on the virus, so don't think you're special. They played you all like a fiddle." "Damn, they played me like a fiddle." "That's enough," I growled, my anger and dislike for the man growing. "Explain yourself. Where is the army?" "Where is the army? Where is the army?" the general mimicked. "Are you stupid, son? They told me you scientists were clever." He turned back to look out the window, his eyes glazed from the drink. "This was planned. Every little detail. Virus X93 was meant to escape. Inside these walls, the Pentagon is monitoring every little detail." "You're lying," I cut in. "Why would they do that?" Hunt shook his head slowly. "Damn, you really are a stupid son of a bitch, ain't you?" I moved towards him, but Karen grabbed the back of my shirt and shook her head. "Leave it, Frank. He's not worth it." The general got to his feet, cigar in hand, and walked over to the corner where, attached to the wall, was a small round camera. He blew smoke into the camera. "They're watching us, whether you like it or not. Watching us right now. Aren't you, you sons of bitches?" "How do you know all this?" Karen said. "I know this because, the last 2 years, I have been responsible for planning a contained outbreak of virus X93 in this base, codenamed Project Escape. We wanted to investigate the virus's effects in the field, see how potent it was. 3 days ago, my team and I entered the military base to go through a practice run. Little did I know that the bastards in Washington had other ideas, and we would be releasing the actual virus instead of water vapor as planned. My enemies in the military must have planned it. 60% of the base were infected. The rest were going to be observed to see how they survived." He looked back at the camera and growled. "I hope you're happy now." On the other side of the room, my hand curled into a fist, and Karen's nose flared. The general sensed our rage. "Yes, go on. Be angry. I would. Are you ready for that drink yet?" "No." I was ready to bash his face in. "Why?" I said through gritted teeth. "Why did they do this?" "Why the hell not?" General Hunt shouted. The consumed alcohol was beginning to cause his face to flush. "Did you ever stop and think why you were doing what you were doing?" "No, I bet you didn't. I bet you thought you were the next little Einstein, didn't you? We're all pawns in their little system, each and every one of us. If they want to see an outbreak in a confined environment to study its effects, they're gonna do it, okay? And there's nothing you, me, or your pretty little girlfriend here can do about it." "I want that drink," Karen snapped and made her way up to the boardroom. "Ha, good," the general said. "Now we're getting somewhere." Meanwhile, scowling, I went and stood by the glass. The compound was littered with dead bodies, and the churned up snow had been turned red in large patches. So much destruction, I thought bitterly. After all these years, this is how my research ends. It made me more miserable to think that others had been working on the virus, and that maybe my own breakthroughs hadn't been my own after all. "Is there any way out?" I asked quietly. "Can we escape?" I heard the general rise to his feet and found him walking towards me. Confused, I thought he was going to pass me. But before he did, he lunged at me and landed a clean punch on the side of my jaw. The pain sent me sprawling to the ground. Karen screamed, but before she could help, the general grabbed my gun and pointed it at her. "Stay right there, honey," he said. "Not a move." Seeing stars, I felt a boot plant on my back. Then the general's voice whispered in my ear. "Sorry about that. Had to do it for the camera, and in case there are any bugs in the room. Yes, there is a way out. I came in on a seaplane 2 miles from here on a secret airstrip. We have to make our way to the airstrip, and I can fly that plane out of here." He dragged me to my feet and offered a hand. "You could have just written it on a piece of paper," I muttered, rubbing my jaw. "Oh yeah," he said. "I could have written it down, I guess. I suppose I just wanted to punch you. You have that kind of face." In the boardroom, we waited. It was west-facing, and out of the panoramic windows, the sun began to set on the horizon, casting long shadows across the military base. There was a stillness about the place. Below, dead bodies lay motionless, the surrounding snow tainted with blood. On the building across from us, 3 crows sat perched on the gutter ring, eyeing the feast, but seemingly hesitant to commit. Maybe they had seen the infected in action and wanted no part of it. Warily, feeling the strain of the last 4 hours, I settled into a leather chair as far away as possible from General Hunt. Karen sat across from me as I scribbled on a piece of paper the escape plan. "Secret airstrip, 2 miles away. General Drunk is going to fly us out." Karen glanced at the old man. "Him?" I nodded and scribbled. "Yes, he's our only hope. Our Obi-Wan." Karen rolled her eyes and took the piece of paper over to General Hunt, no doubt wanting to quiz him on the escape plan. I smiled. She was the most organized person I knew. Unluckily for Hunt, we wouldn't leave this room until she was happy with the plan. General Hunt was busy puffing cigar smoke into the dust motes floating in the evening light as Karen slid beside him. My eyes drifted from dim to the little black camera wedged in the ceiling corner. Were they watching us in Washington? I imagined a group of military personnel sat around an identical boardroom table, observing a screen of cameras. In most of the monitors, the dead lay in still images. In others, the infected aimlessly staggered about. And in one, perhaps the top right corner, there was General Hunt, the man they were hoping would be dead by now. And beside him sat a scientist. And who was that on the other end of the room? The man who looked like he was sulking? Ah, yes. It's the scientist's ex-husband. Can we run a background check on him? Dr. Francis Jones, Yale educated, a senior employee on Virus X-93, level 5. Oh, good for him for surviving so long, someone says. A little jealous, I watched Karen and General Hunt exchange notes. They seemed to be getting on just fine without me. I turned away and thought of the infected lingering outside in the corridor. Hunt had said the door was bomb-proof, but that didn't make you feel any easier. Good thing we had never solved Virus X-93's memory degradation problem then. Replacing the cytoplasmic C-terminus had not worked, neither had introducing an amino group to the threonine protein. How about altering the protein pathway? No, that wouldn't work. Jeffrey had tried that. Or had he? Maybe not. Oh well, guess I can't ask him now anyway. At daybreak, I woke. Karen was curled in the chair beside me, her breath fogging in the cold. Shivering, I rose and shook off my cramped muscles. On the boardroom table was the empty whiskey bottle, but no sign of the general. "He's abandoned us then," I muttered, disappointed but not shocked. I went and stood by the windows and looked out into the bright morning, where a lingering crescent moon waited. In the snow, a flock of crows had plucked up some courage and were feasting on the dead. Yet, I was keenly aware that a few of the bodies were missing, got up and walked away no doubt. Behind me, Karen groaned. "Morning," she said, stretching. "It's freezing in here. Where's General Drunk got to?" "Gone," I said, more smugly than I was feeling. With him disappearing was our best chance of getting out. We're going to have to make it back our... The door opened, and in stepped a soldier dressed in a snowsuit and a balaclava. I fumbled for my Glock, but panic spread about my body when I couldn't find it. "Looking for this?" the soldier grunted, holding up my Glock. In his other arm were more snowsuits and clothing, which he dragged into the room. Using his foot, he hooked the door closed. I stood rooted with fear, preparing to be shot. The soldier, however, threw the snowsuits onto the table and slid the Glock along the table towards me. Then, he took off the balaclava, and General Hunt's amused face grinned. "Better be more alert next time, Frankie. Otherwise, you'd be a dead man. Took the gun right off you while you slept. Here, I managed to get you both a couple of suits and thermals." "How the hell?" I said, gaping. "What?" he barked. "You don't become a general in the US Army for nothing. I started out as an officer in the Green Beret. If they want me dead, well, they better goddamn know I'm not waving the white flag. I'm not French." "Many infected out there?" Karen asked. "A few. Nothing an old man can't handle." We got changed into the snowsuits as General Hunt smoked another cigar. The men seemed to have an endless supply. Once dressed, I felt more optimistic, much less cynical. Maybe Hunt knew what he was doing after all. "Right," the general said, placing two large hands on the board table. "Operation Breakout." He looked at the little black camera. "Ha! How do you like the name of that?" he barked. "When I get my hands on you all in Washington, you'll be sorry." Weren't we meant to be discreet about the breakout?" The general frowned. "Oh, yes. Ah well, never mind. First, we need a distraction. Do we have a volunteer?" He looked between me and Karen. "Anyone?" Karen gave me puppy eyes. Dismayed, I gulped and raised my hand. "Good, about time you did something useful." He turned and pointed out to where a pile of oil barrels stood in the military base. "We need you to set those alight." My eyes widened. "What?" "Yes, I didn't say this mission would be easy. Part 1 includes blowing that supply up, create a distraction for the infected." "Part 1? I asked. "What's Part 2? The general pulled out a set of keys. "We're driving to the airstrip. There's a vehicle on the other side of this building. Once we have the distraction, Karen and myself will make for it. We'll rendezvous with you outside." "And the gate?" "The gate's open. It was General Martin's last order. I think the sly fox knew it was a setup and tried to make it out, ruffle a few feathers up above if he could." The old man looked at his watch. "We better get a move on. The plan was to bomb the base into oblivion at 1800 hours on the second day of the outbreak. That gives us just over 9 hours to get to the airstrip and get the hell out. Huh, plenty of time. We'll be napping in the Caribbean by midnight." Karen and I exchanged a miserable look. More likely, if we made it out and even reached the plane, they would shoot us down. But we had nothing to lose. And so, with the general in higher spirits, as if this was just a mere training exercise, he rambled off how I was to get down to the barrels. 3 rooms down from here, Frankie, is a room with a shattered window. Some poor bastard tried to escape down it using a rope. He's dead, but the rope's still there. All you need to do is make it to the barrels and light the fuel and create a distraction. Easy as pie." In a daze, the general escorted me to the door. I gaped at Karen, looking for a savior. But she only beamed and said, "You're so brave, Frank." Ugh, I didn't feel that brave. Why can't Hum climb down? The men had already scored the camouflage and devised the plan to break out of Alcatraz. Why would climbing down a rope be so hard? And wait, wasn't it his fault we were in this mess all along? Grumbling, I gave them both another longing look before stepping out of the door. The general winked. "Good luck, Frankie. We'll meet you down there." Where? The door closed. I sighed and turned and faced the gloomy corridor. A cold draft carried down, and somewhere a single drip rang out. Or maybe it was the shuffling of feet. Not wanting to waste time, I counted 3 doors down and made towards it. Each step felt heavy, and in the draft, the hood on my snowsuit flapped. At the door, I crouched, pushing it open, revealing a small office, perhaps inhabited by one of the contract managers. My eyes were drawn to the shattered window where a rope swung in the icy wind. Here it was, General Hunt's great escape plan. At the windowsill, I peeked over at the base. It was about 20 feet down. I checked the knot holding the rope before hoisting myself into the cold. Definitely did not get paid enough for this. Shuffling slowly down, it was all going well until, in my peripheral vision, a black spot appeared. An infected was watching me from about 100 meters away. On the ground, the feasting crows had also stopped, and they began flapping around, as if they were urging the infected on. Oh shit. I let the rope slacken and fell the remaining distance into the snow. The infected, a muscular soldier, remained rooted to the spot. A Mexican standoff, waiting to see who would draw first. I got up and bolted. Towards the barrels of gas? Fuck no. I ran in completely the opposite direction as fast as I could, cursing as I went. There was a small alley between 2 barracks, and I made for the space. More figures appeared to my right and left, but I didn't have time to look. I could hear their snarls all around me, their feet churning up the snow. 20, 30, 40 bodies pouring out from every direction, making for the extremely unfit scientist running for his life. Once through the alley, I came out between the open space before the Bremer walls. White flat snow spread out until the concrete walls rose. For some reason, as I ran, I had a bizarre image of myself, Karen and General Hunt on Family Feuds, facing off against a team of serious-looking FBI agents. I didn't know what the question had been, but everybody except the grizzled FBI agents were laughing at my answer. I found myself laughing now as I ran. This was it. Time was up, and I was ready to go home and sleep. Glancing behind, there might have been 100 of them. But I got the question right, I thought. I gave the right answer. You have to give me the points. The host on Family Feuds was wiping the tears from his eyes and telling the audience goodnight. I was slowing down now, barely even jogging, and was about to give up, when a loud clunk came from the side of me. "Frank!" Karen called, driving a military jeep. Beside her in the passenger seat sat Hunt, grinning. "Great diversion, Frankie, you son of a bitch," he called. "You really went for it, didn't you? Maybe I was wrong about you." As the rumbling jeep pulled up alongside me, with barely seconds remaining, I flung myself into the rear seats. "I got the answer right," I gasped, delirious. "You have to give me the points. It's not fair. It's not fair." "What the hell are you talking about, you crazy bastard?" Hunt growled as the jeep pulled away. Karen glanced and gave me a weary look, then screamed, for an infected had closed in and grabbed hold of the trunk. Karen slalomed the car, but the dead soldier hung on, snarling as his legs were dragged through the snow. We were driving alongside the auto walls now, the little figures behind us getting further and further away. General Hunt had pulled out a handgun and was dangerously trying to aim at the infected head. Shot after shot was narrowly missing my head. "Watch out!" I yelled. "Move your fat head, will you, Frankie?" he growled, popping another shot which missed. A thick hand grabbed the back of my neck and I screamed, "Get him off me!" Karen swiveled the wheel and the car jerked, but the infected wouldn't let go. General Hunt barked an order that might have been duck, and a gunshot rang out over the noise of the growling jeep engine. Gasping, I felt the weight of the infected slip away. "Jesus, General!" Karen yelled, her eyes white with shock. "You almost shot Frank!" Hunt grinned, his eyes glinting with a mix of adrenaline and amusement. "Only way to get that damn thing off, wasn't it?" He holstered the gun. "Frankie, you okay back there?" "Yeah, I'm good," I managed to reply, trying to steady my breathing. "Thanks for the save." "Save? Huh, more like a headache. You nearly got us killed." Hunt chuckled. "But you're welcome, I suppose." The engine roared and snow churned in the wheels. I hit. The gate came into view, a narrow slit barely large enough for the vehicle. "Hold on," Karen called, foot on the accelerator. And with that, we passed through the gap. And minutes later, we were out in the open, the military base shrinking in the rearview mirror. With the military base behind us, we drove across the flat expanse of a frozen lake. The jeep rumbled over the ice, the engine roaring alongside a bitter wind. It was cold enough out here that General Hunt's mustache had begun to accumulate a small layer of frost. Not that the man had noticed. He was too busy explaining the next phase of the plan. "Inside that forest," he said, pointing ahead to dense trees, "is the airstrip. Now, if we're lucky, the plane will still be there. If we are luckier yet, we might be alone. But I don't think that will be the case. I'm expecting company, so once we reach the forest, we'll abandon the vehicle and walk the rest of the way." Karen shifted gear and looked at him. "Who are you expecting?" "Nothing we can't handle," the general barked. He grinned at me in the backseat. "What do you reckon, Frankie? Want to kill some more?" "Not really," I muttered. Out on the lake, something caught my eye. I leaned forward in my chair. "What's that?" The general turned and squinted. Before he could answer, Karen jerked the steering wheel to the side and brought the jeep to a halt. "It's a person," she said. "We're not the only ones to escape the base then." Our breaths steamed as we observed the figure staggering across the ice. "A survivor?" I asked. "No," General Hunt growled. "It's probably an infected. Go on, Karen. Keep driving. We'll approach with caution." The general turned out to be right. Clad in a white lab coat which flapped in the breeze, the infected turned and snarled at the jeep when we approached. Karen took one look at the man and glanced at me. "Dr. Fredrickson?" I muttered. "Nice to see you again." The once scientist and colleague growled and stumbled towards us. Karen put the jeep in gear and rounded him. I got the Glock out and was about to take aim when General Hunt grabbed the gun. "Don't," he said. "Let the son of a bitch escape. He's not a problem anymore." I relaxed my hand and watched the snarling infected get steadily further away. The man had been somewhat of a friend and had even attended our wedding. Yet, I felt no sorrow. In fact, I didn't feel anything at all. The last 40 hours or so had left me numb, questioning my life's work. Perhaps we deserved to die, as pessimistic as that might seem. Who were we to escape with our lives when our creation had been this? In the backdrop, the military base still loomed behind Dr. Fredrickson. From this distance, its concrete walls appeared as mere small blocks, no larger than toy models. Even so, they remained a dark blemish on the landscape. And as we left the flat lake and ventured into the forest, I grimaced, praying I would never lay eyes on it again. "Easy does it," General Hunt called out. "Bring her right in here, Karen. We'll walk the rest of the way." The jeep came to a halt, and we disembarked in the deep snow. The surrounding spruce trees leered over us, looking almost angry, as if they were aware of the evil brought into their land. The wind, which had been so powerful on the lake, seemed non-existent here. In our white suits, we began to trudge forward. "What are you going to do when we make it out?" I asked Karen as we walked. Karen remained silent for a moment. Then she said, "I don't know, Frank. Try to rebuild, if that's possible." Her answer caught me off guard. "Rebuild us?" She nodded. "Yes," I said, my heart thudding in my chest. "I would like that. Very much indeed." "Oi, lovebirds," General Hunt interrupted. "We're nearly there, so shut it, will you?" Karen grinned and whispered, "What are we going to do with him?" "Oh, I don't know. If we get remarried, maybe he can be the ring bearer." "Or the bassman." I said. "No way, Jose. Imagine the speech he'd give. Frankie, you son of a bitch, always knew you'd find some cojones. Karen's easily not right in the head for remarrying you. Karen snorted. Good thing I'm not offended easily. Yeah, that is a good thing, right? The forest opened into a large clearing where the makeshift airstrip had been set up. The runway had been plowed into the frozen permafrost and ran for about 200 meters. At the far end of the runway, my heart leapt at the sight of a small plane. Yet, this excitement was short-lived, for 2 soldiers dressed in similar snowsuits to our own stood around guarding the plane. Knew it, the general whispered as we crawled to the edge of the tree line. Knew they would be there. General Lee's scum unit, I imagine. I didn't ask who General Lee was and tuned out to focus on the M4 carbines strapped around the soldiers' necks. The closest one to us lit a cigarette and scanned the forest, his grizzled face alert. Guests leaving the hotel infected wanted to check out, but this man had been employed to stop just that. General Hunt motioned for us to move. I thought for the first time his face showed visible signs of weariness, as if the past day had been easy and the real test lay ahead. Keeping as low as possible, we began to crawl into the clearing. It was early afternoon, and the day had clouded over and the white sky threatened snow. One arm at a time, I thought, crawling, exhausted from the past 24 hours. It's all going to be over soon though, I guess, when Captain Grizzle splatters my brain with that carbine of his. Unless he takes a liking to us, of course, and offers a cigarette. Halfway across the clearing, I looked up, and Captain Grizzle was stubbing out the cigarette. He hadn't taken his eyes off the forest. General Hunt lay motionless just ahead. When I reached him, he whispered, "This is the furthest you guys go. I'm going to take out that one there, and if anything goes awry, you shoot him to high hell. Okay, Frankie?" Karen crawled alongside us, her face pale. "Good luck, Hunt. Thanks for organizing a breakout of the virus we had spent our entire lives working on and killing our friends and colleagues and loads of innocent people just so you can sit in Washington and tick a few boxes and pretend like you're doing something for once." She gasped and inhaled a breath. General Hunt's face was blank. Yeah. Sorry about that. Hopefully I'll make up for it now." And with that, he began crawling towards the runway. We soon lost sight of him. The sky broke, and the first snowflakes drifted in the wind. It seemed like we waited forever there in the opening, concentrating for the first sound of a fight. Minutes passed, but still nothing. Until I thought I heard a sharp intake of breath in the wind, and looking up, I found Hunt tussling with the limp body of Captain Grizzle, whose eyes lolled and closed as the general laid the body to rest. "Come on," Karen said. "Let's get moving." "He told us to wait." "I don't care what he said. Let's go and help." Before I could argue, she started crawling forward. I reached out for her leg, but then deciding it was pointless, followed. As we neared the runway, General Hunt emerged, crouching beneath the plane's wing and motioning for us to join him. "Dealt with them. Now, let's get out of here before anyone else arrives," were probably going to be his words. But a burst of gunfire came across the clearing, and the general cried out and fell. From out of the forest emerged a group of soldiers. "General!" Karen screamed. "Karen, we have to move!" I shouted, dragging her to the floor. More bullets whizzed past our head, thudding into the side of the plane. "No, Frank. You get the general inside the plane. I'll do the rest." "What do you mean?" "I'll fly us out." "You can't fly." "I can. Jeffrey and I had been taking lessons for the past year. I never told you." Over more bullets and the shouts of the soldiers nearing, I gaped. "What?" "Not now, Frank," she growled. "Get Hunt and I'll fly us out, okay?" I nodded, breathing heavily. Heavy snow had begun to fall, and the approaching soldiers disappeared in the white haze. I ran over to Hunt as Karen went for the plane. His eyes were glazed and bloodshot. "Frankie, you son of a bitch," he gasped. "I told you we would make it out." I tried to stem the blood pouring out of his stomach. "Come on, we're not leaving you. On your feet, soldier." "No, leave me." He shoved something into my hand, a small rectangular box with a flashing red light. "What's this?" "An aerial signal jammer," Latest military spec. It will stop all radars from detecting the plane. A bullet whistled past and smashed into the side of the plane tail. Go on, the general cried. Get out of here while you still can. I'll distract them for a bit. He pulled out of his pocket a hand grenade and grinned. I'm gonna send these bitches to high hell. The plane's engine kicked into life and the rotor blade on the front began to whirl. Well, okay, I guess this is it then, I said, shaking his hand. Thanks for nothing. Ha, that's the spirit, Frankie. See you in hell. And those were the final words I ever exchanged with the general. We left him there on the runway on his last mission. True to her word, Karen flew us out of there, and since then, we've been on the run. I record now from an undisclosed location, Tijuana, Mexico. Or am I misleading to divert the Secret Service in the wrong direction? Maybe we are in the Philippines or Brazil. But whoever is listening to this, know that we made it out and are safe. I am delighted to announce that our marriage is back on track and Karen is expecting. Let it be known that we will not name the baby Hunt if that is what you're thinking. As for Hunt, I am unsure whether the man died on that Alaska runway. 2 months ago, an anonymous postcard arrived in the mail at the hotel where we were staying. Although it bore no written message on the back, it was addressed to F and K, and the front displayed a cartoon of a man on a beach smoking a cigar. I like to believe it was from Hunt, but who truly knows? Anyway, that is the tale of Virus X-93. I can only assume that the military base was destroyed and the infected were all eradicated. Perhaps the only evidence of the outbreak is a top-secret file somewhere in a closet in the Pentagon. I like to believe this marks the end of the virus. Yet, maybe in some unknown laboratory, perhaps deep underground, it awaits in a set of test tubes, hoping to resurface one day and finish what it started.